Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. All right, so I see folks are starting to file in now. Thank you for joining us for today's conversation. So I just want to, let's make sure that we are all live. I am Jen Stojkovic. I am the Executive Director of SF City. We are here to have a really interesting conversation about scaling social impact in a remote world. So some of you may have joined us throughout last year's conversations where we were talking about how we can, in this remote first environment, tackle what the concept of remote volunteering, social impact, and what it really means to engage employees in this new world. We're excited to continue this conversation today with a number of high-level folks that we work with in the One City Forum SF City environment that are really leading the way in terms of doing either social impact from the nonprofit side or social impact from the tech side in San Francisco during this pandemic. We released a report that you might have seen at the beginning of the year, end of last year, where we talked about different case studies where these folks were able to really make a difference despite being in a strange pandemic time, either from a nonprofit side or from a tech company side. So we are excited to have a number of folks here today. Before I bring up our esteemed speakers, I have housekeeping to share with each of you. So first off, we're going to be doing a 45-minute panel conversation today. So we will not have any breaks until about 45 minutes in, and then we will do Q&A. That's the next piece. We do have Q&A today. So if you want to go down to where it says Q&A, that tab right there, that's where we recommend that you put your questions in. We will be getting through all of the questions, hopefully about 40 minutes or so into the hour, which means that please pile in your questions as you have them. We will see them all and get to them as soon as we can. If you are going to be jumping off a little bit early, as I know some of you will for your lunchtime, or perhaps you are watching a recording, the good news is this is going to be shared out afterwards. So if you miss a very tantalizing detail that you go, what on earth did Carl at Twitter just say? I need to write that down. No worries, it is all recorded and will be shared out after the event. Lastly, we'd love for you to share your thoughts on social media about today's event. So if something really piques your interest or is very interesting, we would love for you to share and tag at SF City and use the hashtag scaling social impact. A little bit of a mouthful there, but as long as you get the tag to us, we'll make sure to share it out. You can see that Zach has dropped it down there in the chat as well. So without further ado, I think the best thing would be to bring up our amazing guest speakers today so we can get going for today's conversation. So let me welcome up all of our speakers. Let's get you turning the camera on, mic on, and then we'll introduce each of you. Wow, that was like a very seamless, like boom, 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 everybody hopping on. So I am excited to have this amazing panel of folks here today. We have Carl Rubbelard, who is from Twitter, formerly at Meals on Wheels and in the nonprofit ecosystem. So we've really got double trouble there. He's worked both sides of this and is truly one of the experts in the space. Amanda Lenigan from Cruise. She has done, I think, one of the coolest case studies using the technology of your company and how to pivot in the pandemic for good. Like just a truly incredible story. Vida Nazarin, A26 Valencia, she has been holding down the fort, making sure that our kids stay connected and get educated throughout this entire pandemic at a time when it wasn't too easy in San Francisco. So incredible story there. And Victor Cordon, how are you, from Okta, one of our long-term members that has really just made such a strong effort in social impact. So with that being said, hi everybody. How's it going?
Good.
Afternoon.
Awesome. I love all of the different backgrounds. Typically, we would do one of these conversations in person, but I am excited that we're able to connect so seamlessly with everyone today. I think the best thing that we could start with is perhaps we'll just kind of go around the room and share just a little bit about what we do, because for some folks, social impact and what it really means to do this is a little bit nebulous, and explaining a little more about what your role is, I think would be great. So Carl, how about we start with you?
Thank you, Jen. I just want to say it's so exciting to be here. And I'm actually out of nostalgia wearing the One City shirt in the days where we could all be together. And I just want to applaud you, everyone on the call. I mean, the ways in which people have responded over these last 2 years is astounding. And certainly SF City is on the top of being able to, just transform so much of your work to be remote. But again, my name is Carl. I'm the head of social impact at Twitter. And in one sentence, I like to say what we do is we bring our company and community together as a force for good. And it really is one of the best jobs because we get to see the passion and the skill and expertise of Twitter employees. We really want to connect those and make sure that they are participating and actively part of the community all around. And the final thing I'll say is that we do that in 3 ways. We do that through our people themselves, the employees and our community partners. We do that through our platform, Twitter, and we do that through our profits or any ways that we can give back in the way of grants and donations and sponsorships. So those are really the 3 ways we see social impact at Twitter.
Amazing. I love the throwback. I was seeing that green. I'm like, is he wearing that? I can't wait till we can go back. Amanda, welcome to the stage.
Thanks, Jen. It's such a pleasure to be here today. And I appreciate Cruise being included in this conversation and the report that you all led that I know we're commenting on today. I just wanted to add that being a part of the One City Forum is just a really great way for, I think, all of us to collaborate and bring different perspectives together and focus on what's best for our city and what we can each do to support the needs during the pandemic and beyond. That's what I've focused my career on, is really cross-sector collaboration and all at the heart of societal change. So value the collaboration here and the broader group that we're consistently meeting with. And at Cruise, I head up social impact, and it's a really exciting time to be a part of Cruise. It's also kind of rare to get to bake in social impact and think about how an entirely new industry can support our communities in different ways. So I'm thrilled to get to share a little bit about how we've done that throughout the pandemic, but also just enjoy the conversation around like what's coming next and how can we continue to build on some of the great lessons that were learned over the last couple of years.
Amazing. Vida?
Hi, everybody. I'm Vida Nazarian, and I run E26 Valencia. Also really excited to be part of today's panel. Some of you might know us as the Pirate Supply Store on Valencia Street. Our name is our address, and if you need a peg leg, you could go there. But what our real work is actually we have 3 centers in the Mission, the Tenderloin, and Mission Bay. And we serve over a dozen schools in San Francisco. And we help young people, particularly low-income students of color, with their writing and help them develop that voice that they need to be successful at school and in their lives. And we publish the students. So you may see our student writing in BART ads, in BART stations throughout the city, or on coffee sleeves, or during Pizza Poetry Month, order pizza, there might be some E26 writing there. And the goal being that as students see their names, their words in print, they have this audience for what's possible for themselves and for the future. And to me, this is part of like having a more just democratic society, is students having voices and contributing in that way.
Did not know the peg leg thing.
Scurvy be gone, we have it. Scurvy be gone, peg legs. There's a whole slew of fun things if you're a pirate in need of supplies.
It's amazing. All right, Victor, you gotta follow that now.
I know. Oh my God. Well, I guess I'll just say thank you all for being here, and thanks Jen and the SF City team for giving us the platform to just have this conversation amongst friends. So happy to be here, and also kind of touching on what other folks shared. And their kind of personal connection with the One City Forum and the great work that we get to do. I'm a San Francisco native, born and raised here in the Bayview, Lowell High graduate. And so it feels really awesome to be able to represent myself and represent Okta and the work that we do in the city that I really love so deeply. So I help lead our social impact work at Okta on the Okta for Good team, work with an incredible team there. And I directly help oversee some of our programs, including our employee engagement work, connecting our employees with nonprofits around the world, some of our strategic nonprofit partnerships in our communities, and our philanthropy work as well. Our mission at Okta for Good is to strengthen the connections between people, technology, and community. And that's also a perfect kind of connection point to the goals of SF City and the forum. So just really excited to be here today.
All right. So as you all can see, we have quite an incredible lineup of folks that they really know how to live and breathe everything impact, particularly in a remote setting. So this is a quick reminder before we get started. Q&A down there. So if you have questions throughout today's conversation, drop them in that Q&A and we will try to get to as many as possible. It's tempting to leave them in the chat, but it's hard to organize them if they're in the chat. So that Q&A button is your best friend. Okay, now I've done my job here. So I would love to just kind of kick it off with the most basic starter question of what kind of challenges have the pandemic brought for your work? Perhaps Carl, we can start with you.
Sure. And when you asked that question, I was literally like time warp back to March 2020. And this is something we're going to talk about for years. And to be honest, like we can splice and dice this so many ways, but I think the one thing I have continued to think about is the long tail of this pandemic. We're just seeing the beginning of the long tail. So what we observed from 2020 are lessons in a particular period of time, but we need to challenge ourselves to keep learning even as we go, because it's never going to feel the way it did before. And I think that's one of the lessons that we've really learned. But I was just thinking about that, and I remember doing some sort of small webinar. It was actually an internal webinar for Twitter. And we were talking about a project we run called Hack Week, which invites Twitter employees in to a space to solve problems both within the company and outside of the company. And I had to do like a 5-minute presentation. I was very nervous. I had to do all my notes. I get through the entire 5 minutes. I'm not joking you. And I realized I had been on mute the entire time. Right? Like we had to learn how to do our work. And like I'm someone who had done video meetings, but it was like everything was different. And I remember like, our cats, our partners, our families were all of a sudden at work with us, our children, if you have children. These are things that like each individual really had to confront. And I'm amazed how much like ways people have adapted to get through. So I think personally and professionally, we should all honor that experience. But then just in terms of Twitter, one of the things I really emphasized in the report is, March 10th was when all this happened. And we had already started planning our huge company-wide global day of service in May of 2020, which is designed all around being in person. So we had to kind of rethink and redo everything. And I always like to say, like, I think it's necessity is the mother of all invention. Like we were able to really adapt to that, but it had so many challenges. And I think one of the things that we learned really quickly and what was difficult, and I'm sure everyone in this call can relate to this, everybody wanted to help. Everybody wanted to pitch in, but the opportunities to do that were so limited. So one of the things we did really quickly is we really flexed our employee giving program because we knew people couldn't be in person, so they wanted to give. And we've actually been able to 10 times the amount of money, both employees and Twitter matches every year since then. So there are some good things, and obviously we have adapted, but thank you for the question.
That was a really good level set, I think, in general, just kind of understanding what it was like to go through that shift. And maybe Beta will hop over to you on the counterpoint, because for nonprofits, all of a sudden working at home with family and cats around wasn't necessarily the case for a lot of folks. So what was the biggest challenge that you faced?
Yeah, I mean, we actually back in March 2020, we also went online. So we had our organization is really based on this idea that students do best with individualized attention, and that's human to human. No offense to the techies out there, but human to human, in person, human connection. And that's like a fundamental value, and that's how we support the kids to do their best. And so here we were where that wasn't allowed, and yet our students needed support more than ever. So we had to reimagine every single program for an online environment. A lot of the students that we serve do not have access to Wi-Fi or computers. So we found ourselves spending time trying to figure those things out alongside them, alongside the school district. And just to break it down to the most fundamental level, this was how young people were getting educated. So without those things, they were actually losing the right to a public education, which is really, really upsetting. We figured all that out. We quickly pivoted. We also had to retrain all our volunteers for the online setting. Like, our staff has become Zoom. I'm not a Zoom expert, but the staff is, like, they know everything about all the different video conferencing tools to make sure that students are getting attention in the way that they need, and like joyful instruction, which is what we're known for at our centers. Fast forward though, so then we went a year of this alongside schools and families. And then last summer, we had the first opportunity to try in person. So in the summer, we did a combination of in-person writing camps alongside the online versions. And then 2 months later, it's August, schools are reopening, figuring out everything again in person. So I think the word for the last couple of years is a little bit of whiplash, constantly reevaluating all our systems, repositioning them. And we've been in person at our 3 centers and a dozen schools since August, serving the students, about 5,000 students this year.
So it sounds like in many ways you other than the like learning, you were able to still deliver the services just in a different way.
Right. I think one of the core concepts of 826 Valencia, besides individualized attention, is this responsive programming. So we're quite good at like saying, what do the students need? What do the schools need? How do we step up to meet those needs? And we've done that for the last 2 years in ways that have really pushed us. And are grateful for the tools that are available for us to do that. But I would say there's nothing, it's really joyful to be in person with our students. And what we need is for the volunteers to come and to come back to our centers and to our schools, because while we're fully in person and offering those services, not everybody is back into their offices or whatever. And so we just have a really, really intense need for volunteer signups. This is my pitch. Volunteer with 826 Valencia.
Yeah. And I think that theme of what a remote first San Francisco looks like from a literal volunteering perspective is something we can get into in a moment. Victor, perhaps we'll go to you and then you, Amanda, because Amanda, you have a very unique story. Perhaps Victor first. What did that change look like to you?
Yeah, thanks. And I think Beta's example is, something that is shared by so many hundreds of thousands of nonprofits across the country and around the world, right? This need to be responsive and meet the needs of the moment to serve communities, and also, frankly, even more community members in need because of the kind of the domino effect of the pandemic on so many facets of life. And, for us at Okta, since our beginning, one of our core focus areas from a social impact perspective has been investing in nonprofit technology and really thinking about the ways that nonprofits can be better enabled to leverage technology to power their organizations, to meet their missions. And I think this has been work that we've been focused on for many years, and it became even more clear the opportunity to continue to invest in this in really intentional ways with the onset and continued impact of the pandemic. So we launched our nonprofit technology initiative actually in April of 2020. So this was at Octane at our annual conference, and this was a month after the pandemic had started. And while we had already kind of conceived of this program beforehand, it was like, oh wow, it was like, this is even more of a great opportunity for us to really stand by the nonprofit sector, stand by our communities, and signal to funders, to other tech companies, hey, we can invest in programs, but let's also really invest in the infrastructure and the tech capacity of nonprofits. And so I guess for anything for us, it really allowed us to double down in our belief in that and really lead by example.
I remember that. That was really interesting timing. Aaron's big announcement. And then of course, like literally the entire world kind of changed a few weeks after that.
Right.
Good timing there. Okay. So Amanda, tell us a little bit about what the experience was like for Cruise.
Great. And I'm happy to jump in after that comment as well, Victor, on building the capacity of nonprofits through this pandemic, because I think that's relevant to our story as well. So Cruise, for those of you who don't know, we're focused on building a more equitable, sustainable form of transportation. So we were still in R&D mode when the pandemic hit, and we did not have a delivery program. But as you all know, everything changed in March of 2020. And we had the opportunity of really thinking about how we could help at that unique moment in time. And, knowing that we had a fleet of autonomous vehicles available and knowing that food insecurity was skyrocketing, that's when we connected two of our now long-term partners, or connected with them, and started conversations around, how can we work together to potentially utilize our technology to help deliver equitable service at scale. That's one of the questions that the CEO of the food bank kind of posed as we were having these conversations. And I think that, our social impact program had the benefit of being shaped and formed in this moment. So we kind of began as a crisis response, but now we've delivered more than 1.9 million meals across San Francisco. And these are partnerships that we want to continue, and we're exploring how we pilot and work together to evolve our service offerings together to meet the needs of low-income residents across the city. And I think that what I'm taking away now 2 years later is that this focus on not just meeting immediate need, but certainly leaning into a community first approach. So leveraging what our leaders in the community like Beta know best, right? And how we can bring some of our solutions, whether that's technology or other resources, to bear. I want to see how that can not just serve the immediate need, but also build the capacity of our partners. So now, the San Francisco Marin Food Bank, they were delivering a few hundred meals a week, and now they're delivering about 12,000 a week. And they see that as a sustained program, and they've reached more individuals and families and found individuals they want to continue serving that otherwise wouldn't have known about, their offerings or been able to reach it. And as a part of getting folks kind of out of initial challenges or poverty or moving beyond this K-shaped recovery, I think they're thinking also about, once you get access to your basic needs, what next steps can you take then? And how can, all of us that play in this ecosystem in San Francisco do our part to really strengthen the capacity of those who are delivering for, the most vulnerable in our community. So to me, it's interesting to think back to that moment in time, because it certainly was an impetus for Cruise's work in this area. But I think the approach and lessons that I think we tried to capture in the report really center around, community first, engage early and often, and look to how we can strengthen that ecosystem and not, come in with necessarily new solutions, but new ways to build the capacity of partners who've been doing this work for a long time.
So I think that's a great jump off point to my follow-up question I'll ask to you first, Amanda, and then we'll go to the rest of the group. So what you have shifted to in the pandemic, so you've just shared this example of the meal delivery, you plan to keep this permanently. You've fundamentally changed social impact at Cruise.
Yeah, so Cruise, our social impact is now core to our DNA. I mean, it's been a natural extension of our mission from the beginning. But I think this commitment that Cruise leadership has made, we've formally joined Pledge 1%. We envision that we will continue to dedicate a portion of our fleet long-term as we commercialize and beyond any community that we go to. We want to ensure that we're leveraging our fleet to serve individuals that need access to basic needs, whether it's food or transportation. That will continue to be like our North Star. So I'm really excited that we're able to formally commit and extend in this way. So we're continuing our partnerships. This is 2 years running now. But the long-term vision is that, we've made this commitment and pledge that's tied to our product. So I'm excited because as we evolve, what we do at Cruise, and as we commercialize, we will always be leveraging what we do best as a business to support our local communities.
Carl, what about you? How to what extent do you see your social impact role permanently maintaining what you've done during the pandemic versus kind of going back to pre-pandemic or the way that things were before?
It's such a great question, and I've loved hearing from everyone on how this has changed, because it has really fundamentally changed. I mean, when I think of the world, our world pre-pandemic, I mean, I do think of this bustling building at Twitter, and we would have community partners for lunch every day. We'd be going to these in-person events every night. One city would host these amazing events, and so much of your world got not caught up, was just dedicated to that level of engagement. And I personally still love that level of engagement. I never want to lose that. But like we've all said, overnight, that basically the light switched off. So I think what it really allowed the Twitter for Good team to do is really better understand and leverage how the product of Twitter itself can be central to social impact. And you've heard that from Victor, you've heard that from Amanda. I mean, when I think of Beta and the work that happens in those amazing 826 spaces, we want the world to hear that, to see that, and feel that. And that's really Twitter's superpower. How do we get Beta's voice, community voices, the voices of the kids in the program out there so people can understand? So we really launched or we really enhanced a program we call Campaigns for Change. And it's interesting on a couple levels. One, you think about the ways in which we would run a company-wide day of service. We bring people from teams with folks in the community, but it happened in person. The Campaign for Change is actually an example of how you do that all digitally. So we really relied on our brand strategy teams, those that like do the tweets on the roof deck at Super Bowl, the confetti, all those crazy, incredible launches that they do for brands and advertisers, they started to do for nonprofits. And then from there, we were able to tap into engineering and other teams to really conceptualize like the whole machine of Twitter and direct that to nonprofits. So 3 of my favorite examples, there's a lot. After the murder of George Floyd, we had so much energy towards racial equity and justice. And one of the groups we started partnering with was the NAACP, LDF. And they were really working specifically on voter suppression in advance of the 2020 election. So we were able to work with that cross-functional team and use Twitter as a tool in the day and in the moment to kind of report and identify any evidence of voter suppression. And what I mean, NAACP, LDF were able to actually get their most prolific content on Twitter. They got the most eyeballs on their work, and they were doing something of real tangible value at the same time. 2 other quick examples. We did this with a group in Brazil called EPAM, who really were combating forest fires in the Amazon River Basin. All of these ideas and all of these issues emerged from the community. I know Amanda said community first, and like that was 100% of what we don't know exactly where the issue is to solve. We can throw a platform and a megaphone at that issue once we know it. So that group came up with like a whole automated bot to basically like respond and become more aware of forest fire and forest fire prevention. And again, use real-time Twitter data to address that. And then finally, one that's actually in progress right now is coming out of Asia and specifically our Singapore market on really using Twitter's audio features to embed like more of a empathetic listening voice when both youth and young people and other folks come with mental health issues. I mean, I do think all of us, myself included, have experienced what isolation feels like throughout this pandemic. And when we can't be together, we have to figure out ways to support each other. So I think that was a great example. That one hasn't gone to market, so to speak, but those are the ideas and the ways I think we've been able to transition. And like you've heard from everyone, we do not plan to stop that. Definitely keep it going.
Right, so maybe mixing it up a little bit to that next kind of natural question, and we'll start with you, Beta. What do you see this ecosystem looking like post-pandemic with this new SF where we have an increasing amount of folks that are going to be remote first? How are you kind of adapting? How are your needs as a nonprofit adapting to that new way of work? Because you need people in person, right? How is that going to work?
Yeah, so one is I'm going to challenge each of you on this call to invite 3 people to do the difficult task of coming to 826 Valencia to tutor young people because they need it. Just the case for the need is greater given that schools were not in person last year. Our students have really need way more support to be able to make the progress that they lost during that year of online learning. So one, I'm going to challenge you all. Like, I know it's hard, leave your home, but you can do it. We do hard things, and especially when there's change that's needed. Two, we do have some options for online workshops with young people. We find that our older students are more able to navigate the online environment than our younger students. And so, for example, we have, Carla was talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, but we have a program called BLAC. So it's the Black Literary Achievement Club. And they're high school students who identify as Black, and they have a writing workshop on Fridays, all with Black mentors who sign up to work with them. And then our high schoolers actually tutor younger students as well. So it's like this 3-level affinity group mentor model. And there is an option to do that sort of volunteering online. We actually had a number of Twitter employees participate in this program last year, which was awesome. And my second shout out to Twitter is they give us money. So that's another way to, even from the comfort of your home, you could actually donate to nonprofits so that we could do the work that we need to do in person. But we are very broadly about being in person with the young people, because that's the need, right? The school sites are where the help is needed. Our centers is where the help is needed. So we do hope that people will come back.
So Victor, from a tech perspective, as you're kind of planning what your footprint looks like with your employees, what do you see as the future of engaging employees, maybe virtual volunteerism and otherwise, in the San Francisco nonprofit community, and more broadly in the nonprofit community altogether?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it is recognizing that our employees are our greatest asset. And where we will have employees here in San Francisco that have decided to stay, there are employees who have went elsewhere and have really taken the opportunity to kind of live their best life, so to speak, and be able to work wherever the heck they want to work, right? And thankfully, with our focus on remote work and dynamic work, we're really able to enable our employees through this technology, actually, frankly, to do their job wherever they want to find themselves. But this has given us a great opportunity to increase our reach around the world. And so if we're investing in empowering our employees, whether it's things like matching gifts programs like that Carl talked about on Twitter, or creating opportunities for employees to get involved, whether it's virtually, whether it's a hybrid thing where there are folks doing stuff on site, but there's an opportunity to do so at home. Learning opportunities. Really, we recognize that volunteerism doesn't necessarily mean actually going, it can't always just be going on site and doing a thing, because frankly, those opportunities may not be helpful, or the person is not actually located where the nonprofit that they're looking to connect with is. So I think it's dynamic in all sense of the word, empowering our employees to really find the thing that they care about, and then giving them the tools and the space to do that, whether it's, again, matching gifts, volunteer time off, et cetera. But I think when it comes back to San Francisco, one of the things that I'm really, and our team is really thinking about is, a lot of our companies in particular have built their fortune, their success here in San Francisco. And so it's really important for us, as we grow globally and we want to invest in different areas around the world, that we stay really connected to this community. Again, SF City and the Forum allows our companies to do so, but it's finding the 826 Valencia, it's finding the Meals on Wheels, Larkin Street, other organizations that we're connecting with that we love, and really doubling down on those partnerships, committing over multiple years, getting our employees to get out there and do the things as well. So fire on all cylinders, make it dynamic, stay true to who you are.
I love that. And that really aligns with what Amanda's saying about going deep into the markets in which you're deploying and you're doing business. Amanda, what tips would you give? Let's kind of take it we've got lots of folks that have products or services they're launching in different arenas and in regions, like particularly Airbnbs or AVs or things like that. What would you recommend to them when they go to new cities to do in terms of figuring out who that partner should be, and how has that worked with Cruise as you guys continue to expand to new cities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from my experience, that approach of engaging with the community first and often is you can't go wrong, right? When you start that way. So I believe in at Cruise, we're always trying to build trust initially, start those conversations and listen. So what we learned from this experience in a pandemic is sometimes letting your guardrails down and not having the solution is absolutely the right way to enter a new community, and listening to those who you don't necessarily need to come in and reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of organizations that have been doing this work for a long time and know that what their needs are, and maybe the discussion's more about how what you have at your company or what you do best. And, each of us have something different. At Cruise, it's kind of unique at autonomous vehicles, but how does that meet the needs of the community at the moment? And where can you support existing organizations that are doing this work to build, their capacity and introduce your unique way to contribute as a part of that broader ecosystem? So those are a few of the ways that we've approached the work. But as we think about entering new communities, I think, I will always be a believer that leading first by listening is just such an important starting point.
So it sounds like in many ways, both Victor and Amanda, you guys are kind of going locally deep in different regions. So rather than spreading it out, really just having strong ties to a few key nonprofits makes the most sense from a business perspective.
I think for us, San Francisco's our hometown, so we're starting
Yeah.
here first, and we've started with a few deep long-term partnerships that could grow and expand, but we're kind of trying to match where we're at as a company with what we're doing. So we're still in the early stages, but I see potential in having national partners or global partners that can allow us to scale in multiple markets in the future. I mean, if you think about 2030 or, many years from now, when we have thousands of autonomous vehicles in multiple markets, that's something that, I'd love to find the right organizations that can enable scale. But I think there is something really unique and valuable in the kind of how on the ground local leaders and community organizations know their market best. And even in the Bay Area, I think we all know the neighborhoods in San Francisco are each very different. The neighborhoods beyond in the Bay Area are each very different. So we want to be sensitive to that. And also, I just want to be humble that Cruise is very much in the early stages of our work. So that's where, I think about scale, but we also want to start with commitments that we can really see through.
Yeah. So I'd love to kind of follow up with what you just said about national partnerships to Carl, and then Vida will kind of wrap up with you before we go to Q&A. As I see there are Q&A filling in, so just a reminder, drop them in. Yeah. Okay. So Carl, you went national. You went. You developed some big things, because I guess Twitter is a very different beast. You're not cars that are deploying in neighborhoods. You're a massive social media platform. What advice would you give to perhaps nonprofits that want to secure those big national type partnerships that might be listening today?
It's a great question, and it is something that looks different locally and nationally, but there are ingredients that are the same. Yeah, if you think of Twitter and the purpose we serve is to serve the public conversation. So we want the authentic conversation happening. We just opened an office in Ghana. We need to understand what is happening in Ghana, and me or someone who's only lived in the US and has never visited is never going to know that. So the strategy underlying it is actually exactly what Victor and Amanda already shared. We need to build a bench from those regions that really understand the culture and nuance. I think in terms of national partnerships, I've come from the nonprofit world, so I deeply understand how we need to bridge perhaps the mission of an 826 Valencia and what's both a local and a national partnership with kind of the interest or the skills of the company. And I think that's really where the secret sauce is. So for Twitter, we're looking at an entity who can really share those voices that we want to hear. And when I'm thinking of Vida, and I've been to 826 and I've seen these creative writing workshops and I've seen the products and the BART ads, we want that to be seen on Twitter. So if you were to think about a partnership, you should be thinking about what it is that you deliver to the community and how that impacts the company in which you're really looking at delivering. And the examples I mentioned earlier, all of them had a strong presence on Twitter. They were eager and excited to learn how to use the product to share their voice. So I think that was a big thing.
Very, very good advice. So Bita, from a nonprofit perspective, there's a lot of folks I think that are joining today that are nonprofit leaders, and it's been a really rough last few years. So what advice would you give in terms of building up that nonprofit resiliency and being able to come out the other side like you've been able to do at 826 Valencia?
Oh, I have so much advice. I mean, in terms of resiliency, I think it's, staying mission driven and around like what the opportunity it is for us and service to our youth and schools and their families. I said this before, like sometimes we have to do hard things. And I think at 826 Valencia, we have a staff and a community who, despite this really difficult time, has decided to do the hard things on behalf of the students that we serve. So I think staying mission driven is really, really incredibly important, and being able to be flexible. I think some of our tech partners have talked about that. We actually, for the first time, have work from home flexibility for teams that need that aren't required to work directly with the students, and just providing more services to the staff, such as therapeutic services and EAP offering. Like, we have to be flexible and step up to meet their needs so they could show up for young people. And I just love what has been said also about like this notion of, there's expertise already in the communities, and like understanding what that expertise is and trusting those voices, and then figuring out what the partnership could offer that aligns with those needs and that expertise. And I think our best partnerships with tech to support us during the pandemic and beyond is when we really like listen to each other, and it becomes like mutually beneficial with the end goal of the mission in mind. So I just wanted to like do a hallelujah to those kinds of comments. And it's been a real pleasure being part of SF City and hearing that repeatedly from our tech partners on the call, to really center the voices of the nonprofit. And then our job's also to center the voices of the people we serve, right? We need to bring those voices forward and then kind of figure out creative solutions together.
So I'm about to jump to Q&A, but I actually have a really quick question for you, Vita. Did you find it did you find that there was mission drift or the potential for mission drift because there was all of a sudden you had to transition to doing things remotely, and maybe there was tech partners that were more willing to do XYZ than what you were looking for? Did you find that to be an issue, and you started thinking maybe as a nonprofit we should start doing this thing instead?
Not really, no. I mean, I think part of my job is making sure that's not happening, like that we're really clear on our mission and finding the partnerships that align with that. I think we get a little bit of it, and Victor mentioned this on a previous call we had, where like a tech partner wants to come and do a one-day like pack backpacks and feel really good about backpack, and that's not how we serve young people. So some of that happens, but then we just in conversations get to a point where we mutually understand like the need of the organization and what the tech company can offer. And it is kind of this relationship building, trust building exercise of understanding both the mission and need, as well as like the opportunity, and like being flexible and working together on that. But we haven't actually drifted away from our mission. We can't, like the need, and I said this earlier, the need amongst our students has only been exacerbated during the pandemic. Like, we need to stick with those needs and make sure that we're meeting them.
Yeah, I can imagine so. Okay, so the Q&A is starting to pile in here. You guys ready for Q&A? Cool. So Nick from Sea City, hey Nick, asked a question that we've touched on a little bit, but perhaps we could dive a little deeper. So with the rise and staying power of remote/remote first work and the workforce moving into less connected points to cities and where their offices are, what does the future of volunteerism look like? And what do you see as the opportunity to keep community engagement thriving? So it sounds like we've touched a little bit about what it looks like from a tech perspective of what you're going to do for impact, both locally and federally or in a larger aspect. But I'm curious, literally remote volunteering, is there perhaps engagements and things that you've seen that actually work really well for your employee base? Because virtual volunteering is not easy stuff. And I'll open that to the crowd, anybody that's seen it work really well and tips that they could have.
I can kick off and talk a little bit about an ongoing volunteer event that we have that we primarily promote to new hires, which is, and if other folks on other companies, they may know this event as well, but it's Missing Maps. And it's done by a consortium of different nonprofits, the Red Cross, who is involved, Doctors Without Borders, and a couple of others. But it's essentially, you are helping map areas of the world that are not mapped. And so you actually like go and you get like an area of the world and you kind of like look at the map and you're like, oh, that looks like a road, that looks like a structure. And then that data through your work ends up getting validated on the ground by real people. And then you're helping map areas of the world that are not mapped. And so that's been a really great, easy way for us to do something that's online that we can deliver regardless of time zone. And it's a great entry point into volunteerism. And we think about, again, we think about it in that sense, right? That like we want to help our employees kind of get on the journey for where they start doing something like that. And the top end of the journey is they are a board member of A26 Valencia, bringing a bunch of their friends to fundraise for the organization and mentor. And like, that's like the activated employee at its, that's optimal level. So that's some of the work that we're doing.
I could just chime in. I previously was at the Taproot Foundation earlier in my career. And I think there's some unique use cases for virtual volunteering to be high impact, and pro bono service is one of them. So if folks are working on strengthening, the capacity of the nonprofit or doing things like board service, I've seen that industry continue to thrive and be able to deliver well remotely. And I think, hopefully the end measure is always like, what's going to create the best impact for the nonprofit partners. And in some cases, it might be that you need, the student tutors on the ground, or in the food bank's case, like you need the drivers out there delivering the meals. And so it's not always a fit, but I do think pro bono service. And then we've also done some mock interview work with our workforce development partners, where if interviews are all 100% remote, you might as well practice virtually as well. So I think it's important to just look at where virtual can provide either greater access to who you can engage or a higher return for the nonprofit, and focus in on those, because I think there'll always be people and a need to do in person as well. But if we're driving towards like what's the best outcome, sometimes the means is actually valuable when it's virtual.
I'll hop in briefly to follow Victor's very great advice with Missing Maps. There's another, this is tactical, an organization called Be My Eyes. Similar to Victor, it allows anyone anywhere to actually help visual cues and assist for a person who is visually impaired. Super easy. You can do it from anywhere and you have total control as a volunteer. So there are lots of options that way, and it'd be great to kind of crowdsource those ideas. But yeah, so this happens at least once a meeting. The kitty will come by. She knows when it's getting exciting. But I would just say there's kind of two sides to this coin. One is that people are burned out, Zoom fatigue. And so even in the beginning, when that worked really well, we have to strategize how to make it work for people. That's one area. I think there's a huge pent-up demand for us to be in person where and when it's safe. So I really see the future as hybrid. I think certain things in certain areas will work really well digitally, and other times people will really want to be together. And I'll share one suggestion or one model that has worked at Twitter really well. When we do these company-wide days of service, we did what we called a move for good. So we invited anyone to move, to run, to walk, to dance, however they wanted to do it. and then they would simultaneously fundraise. So in doing that, we got people to be together. They could have done it from anywhere in the world. And I think we raised, I'm kind of roughly estimate about $25,000 for Afghan vets. So when you combine that kind of decision to do something in the fundraising, you can really generate a lot of great opportunities.
I just want to give a thumbs up to the some of those visual impairment apps. My father actually cannot see, and he just got his first iPad and iPhone, and those apps are completely life-changing. They truly are. I think that for a lot of this, like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's so many programs and things out there that already exist that you just kind of have to create awareness and build team culture around that. This is something that we do here, and onboard the new hires with all these opportunities, and there's a lot that you can do. So I just always have to plug that. Okay, so here's a question from Tessa. How are you all as corporate partners collaborating with other corporate partners to maximize impact in overlapping issue areas like digital inclusion, environment, and racial justice? And I think, Bita, you also, this could be for either nonprofit or tech.
I can just jump in with a few ideas. I think intermediaries have helped. So SF City's been one of them, right? And Pledge 1%'s been another for us. So how do you bring together multiple companies that want to be relevant when an issue is really top of mind for everyone? So there's been some collaborative responses curated that way. But I also, I feel as though on a local level, our nonprofit partners have been really good about how do we work with balancing, different companies' contributions, and where do we need additional assistance, and how can we kind of real time brainstorm to get those needs met. So I think sourcing through, either the nonprofit as the convener of what that could look like, or some of these intermediary groups has been one avenue that I've seen work relatively well.
Yeah, plus one to the intermediaries. So we've worked with one here in the Bay Area called Full Circle Fund that folks may be familiar with. And so as a response to the pandemic, we actually funded a COVID-19 tech accelerator. Full Circle Fund serves the intermediary between corporate partners that want to do skills-based pro bono work and local non-Bay Area serving Bay Area focused nonprofits. And so the accelerator we funded brought together tech talent from a bunch of different corporate companies and really focused on working with nonprofit leaders to identify tech solutions to help meet the pandemic's impact. So that was one. But another thing that we've done recently in collaboration with a couple of our peers that are also cloud-based companies, we have a group, a coalition of the willing called Impact Cloud. And so it's all social impact teams from those companies. And in partnership with NetHope, Okta, Twilio, Salesforce, Box, and a couple of others all collaborated on a disaster simulation, leveraging our technology to help respond to a made-up earthquake in Kigali, Rwanda. But it was a really great opportunity to show how our technology and the product itself could empower the humanitarian response and disaster response. So that was a really cool opportunity that we got to collaborate on.
And I'll add just two more specific solutions. The intermediary, those that kind of convene, are incredibly powerful entities. One of my favorites from 2021, we participated in something called One Stock, One Future. Again, an idea thought of in the in-between space between companies and nonprofits. It essentially invited companies to give shares of equity to Black and brown kids. And so it was a direct investment in the kid. They would get a share of a collaborative stock and could begin life as an investor at 8, really addressing like major issues of wealth inequity. And that one took off. It was amazing to be part of. It was never something Twitter could do alone. So we were thrilled to be part of a consortium. And on that same sort of vein, we are part of what's called the Opportunity Finance Network. This is really run through our CFO and our finance team, but really allowing money on our balance book to be invested in local communities at a much lower rate. So it's kind of like looking at your infrastructure and investment and having a much broader reach than simply philanthropy alone. So I think there are a lot of really exciting and newer models that are emerging to bring these worlds together.
That's a lot of really good stuff. Vita,
I
what
was
do you
just
think?
gonna kind of build off something Amanda said earlier about boards. And we also have an associate board, and our associate board's almost exclusively younger tech employees. But I think what happens besides them like working together to create changes and set goals that benefit 826 Valencia is that there's this like cross breeding of ideas that's happening, and the relationships across all these companies are happening just by serving on the board together. So it's an informal way to create corporate collaboration is when people join boards. And the only other thought I had was pre-pandemic, we actually had one of our corporate partners host a corporate event at one of our centers. And so they invited the corporate reps from various organizations, and together kind of talked about giving and giving back. And, that had some movement for the companies and for 826 Valencia.
Great. Okay, so we have wrapped up our hour. I have only one last question for everybody. For folks that joined in on SF City events, you know that I like to throw a lightning round question at our panelists. So this is your one and only lightning round question. Carl, we are starting with you. Plug your favorite place to eat in the Bay Area and go.
So my husband and I, we're such creatures of habit. We have been getting Zachary's Pizza every Friday. It's a local East Bay pizza place. They might have a couple other locations. I love it so much. It's delicious.
Amanda.
I'm going to say brunch at Zazie in Coal Valley. Staple
Vita.
for my family.
I'm going to go this tiny Thai hole in the wall called Manaban on 24th Street.
Victor.
I love this. Check please, Bay Area. La Corneta, Glen Park.
Okay. I love Golden Era. I'm your resident vegan here. So if you have not had a chance to go eat at any of those places, this is your official plug from the One City Forum. Go order something local for this weekend. It was great chatting with you all. Thanks for giving us your lunch. I will see you all soon.
Thank you.